Good morning and welcome back to Tactics Board. Norwich City's push for playoff contention continues this weekend with the visit of Cardiff City to Carrow Road, and it's a test in which Norwich are really the significant favourites, which obviously didn't really go in their favour at QPR, but this should be slightly different in terms of the fact that Norwich are at home. Their home form this season has been very good, and it feels for once like almost all the factors are pointing in the right direction for Norwich. Of course, there was that fan trouble in the game against Watford and the discontent that stirred up quite a lot of emotion from both sides following that victory. But I think the way that everything's unfolded since then probably lends itself to a pretty positive atmosphere at Carrow Road on Saturday. I get the feeling that everyone will be aligned in that same direction, and whatever substitutes David Wagner makes after how it went against Watford following those substitutions, I don't think we'll see the same sort of reaction. So it feels for once like all the things are pointing in the right direction for Norwich. Perhaps that is a little bit worrying for some Norwich fans of a more negative persuasion, but for this one it feels like they go into it as favourites, and they have probably a slightly easier test than they've been used to in recent weeks. In home games, Cardiff have really struggled for form. They've been changing their formation, their setup to try and deal with it, but not much has really helped. You get the sense they might come to Carrow Road and try and defend solidly. The way that they've spoken about the game in their press conference previewing it is that they expect Norwich to have the ball, and when that's the case, that means they probably will sit in. So a different task facing Norwich. They'll have to break a team down, most likely in a sort of deep block, and they have struggled with that at times this season. So tactically, something that David Wagner will have to wrestle with. He's also got some selection issues in terms of the fitness of certain players, including, of course, the ever-essential Josh Sargent. So I'm interested to see how he combats that. Of course, I've put my predicted 11 together, and here it is. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Grant Hanley and Ben Gibson at centre back, Dimitris Giannoulis at left back, Kenny McLean and Marcelino Nunez in the centre of midfield, with Onel Hernandez on the right, Borja Sainz on the left, and Gabriel Sara in a number 10 position behind Ashley Barnes. In goal, Angus Gunn, I didn't really think had much to do against Watford that he could have done anything about. Of course, there was that unbelievable goal from Yasser Asprilla. There was a tap-in for Mileta Rajovic in the Norwich box. But other than that, Watford didn't really offer too much attack-wise. I felt Gunn was slightly hamstrung by the setup in terms of just chipping long balls towards Ashley Barnes, which was what happened for a little while after Josh Sargent, of course, left the pitch with the injury that looks like it could keep him out of this Cardiff game. And I felt like distribution-wise, he wasn't allowed to do his best work because Norwich were playing that slightly more direct system. So no blame with him on that one. And as I've said in recent weeks and on pretty much every episode of Tactics Board, he is a fantastic goalkeeper, especially at this level. And no worries for me over whether he'll start or not. In goal at right back, Jack Stacey, who again was key in that win over Watford, a real presence driving forward and a real help in that attacking environment. And you'd think that against a Cardiff side that probably will try and be hard to break down, having more bodies in that area that can contribute, that can create, that can put good balls into the box will only help Norwich, and Jack Stacey could have a really key role in that. So I'd expect him to start at right back. At centre back, there's a little bit of a decision to make, because on the ball Norwich looked a lot better with Jakob Sorensen in there. They passed the ball out from the back very well, but you suggest if Cardiff are going to sit deep, there's not going to be as much onus on the centre-backs to try and pass through a press. In fact, it will be easier for them to get up the pitch until sort of they get into that sort of final third and into the Cardiff half, and then those midfielders and attackers really need to come to life. So probably not as much of a consideration in terms of in possession. The way Wagner talked about that decision in his post-match after the game against Watford as well suggested that Grant Hanley would have been his first choice had he not just been coming back from injury. I didn't think he looked especially good against QPR, but Wagner was pleased with his performance, and you'd suggest that in that position he's likely to come in alongside Ben Gibson, who I actually think It's been fantastic in recent weeks, especially when you consider some of the elements that are going on in sort of his personal life. We've got a story on Pinkham.com about an interview he's done with The Athletic where he's gone over some of those struggles, and it really has been a tough time for him, but he's been putting out some very, very good performances, and at Championship level, he is a decent defender. So I'd expect to see him start at left centre-back, at left-back, Giannoulis, and we always have this debate about him versus McCallum, and maybe the fact that McCallum has had the better season of the two. But I thought against Watford, Giannoulis was fairly good, not sensational, but he got into the right areas a lot of the time. He combined fairly well with Borja Sainz, although there was one time when he was steaming up alongside him on the left-hand side and probably should have been played in. But defensively, he looked a little bit more solid. As I said with Stacey, in attacking areas, they'll need more players with that technical ability and good balls in to try and unlock that Cardiff defence. So you expect Giannoulis could play a big part in that, and I'd expect him to start at left back. In the centre of midfield, Marcelino Nunez and Kenny McLean, and I don't think you can really deny Marcelino Nunez if Josh Sargent is going to miss this game. I know people want to see Sidney van Hooijdonk, but my prediction based on what Wagner has done throughout the season really is that Gabriel Sara will actually go into that number 10 position, as we saw, in fact, against Watford, and Nunez will come into that sort of 6/8 role, depending on sort of where Norwich are on the pitch. And I think he again suits this sort of play where you're against a team that's in a deep low block. The number of times I've said that he would actually suit a Daniel Farke team, and they were the best teams at breaking down deep defences. So I think he could fit in there really well as somebody who buzzes around, increases the tempo of how Norwich play and how they move the ball about. And although he hasn't maybe provided as many incisive passes and assists as he could do with his ability, he can play a role earlier on in those attacks, and I'd expect to see him start in midfield if Josh Sargent doesn't start, and that's probably the caution choice that I'm going with at the moment. So I've got Nunez in there alongside Kenny McLean, Mr. Reliable. As we know, I think his performance was fairly up and down against Watford, but still several good moments. Even at QPR, of course, he got his first Championship goal of the season and then played Ashley Barnes through with a fantastic little chip through. And he's played some very nice passes, actually, to get Norwich into advanced positions. And although they have tended to be on the counter a lot of the time, I think he can help unlock that defence and probably play those good passes. He is a technically very good player, and the fact that he's so well-rounded probably means that that aspect of his game is slightly underrated at times, but I think he could help unlock what could be a fairly stubborn Cardiff defence, and we know that David Wagner is going to be choosing him if fit. So I've got him in midfield. On the right, Ono Hernandez, who I thought had his best game in a Norwich shirt for a really, really long time, actually. Against Cardiff, of course, provided that fantastic assist for Ashley Barnes against Watford, he provided that fantastic assist for the Ashley Barnes opener and just looked very dangerous defensively as well. He was fantastic. Not only the sort of hunger and hard work that we've seen from him before, but also just smart decisions and knowing when to jump in and try to win the ball and knowing when to sit off. He seems to really have improved in that sense, as does Borja Sainz, who I've got on the left wing. And although I would like to see him contribute more in and around the box, it's sort of a 1-in-3 ratio of producing goals and assists, and I think he could be doing that slightly more. His work rate is absolutely unbelievable. I was speaking to fans after that QPR game for our fan reaction, and one of them highlighted Sainz's work rate, and I was just watching him a little bit in that Watford game, and I actually thought, yeah, it's unbelievable, until sort of the 40th or 50th minute. He basically didn't stop sprinting, and you can tell why David Wagner loves to have him, not only from an attacking perspective, but also defensively. So I've gone with him on the left. Sara in sort of number 10, as I said, I think will be a choice that Wagner might have to make if Sargent misses out. I know a lot of people want to see Van Hooijdonk, as I said, but he hasn't looked completely fit since he's come in. I think he has been promising. He does certainly like a layoff, but he's probably more one at this stage of his loan that you throw on with 20 minutes left when you're trying to get a result, and he might be able to put the ball in the back of the net. At least that seems how David Wagner feels in sort of the next few weeks. And I know that makes it difficult to assess whether they can sign him permanently, and that's the worry for me, that they could be passing up the opportunity to sign a top European striker who scored fantastic goals in, across Europe really, in terms of his goals in the Eredivisie. Good enough to be signed by Bologna in Serie A. He's played a few games at that level as well, and without really getting the chance to assess him, you would worry about the fact that Norwich maybe would be losing out on the opportunity to sign a player of that calibre at a really good price. So that is the worry for me, but I think at the moment Wagner is just trying to build him up slowly, and maybe we see him contribute more towards the end of the season. And for this one, I'd expect to see Sarah push forward, Barnes up front, and although I think he has improved performances recently, that would slightly worry me in terms of how he's looked generally, especially from the start without Sargent when he's up front on his own. I think those two are the perfect foil for each other, and Sargent gets the best out of him. So I think Norwich would lose a little bit in an attacking sense, but they probably don't need the level of athleticism that Sargent provides against the Cardiff side that might come and sit deep. So Barnes might sort of benefit from maybe playing against a deeper defence where he can use his movement and his nous to try and get on the ball in the box. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him start up front on his own. Of course, a lot of that team selection is based around the idea that Sargent won't be involved, and it was a little bit touch and go talking to David Wagner at his press conference yesterday. So although I'm sure we're all hoping he'll be fit, that's what that 11 is really based on. And it should be an interesting game. It's definitely an opportunity for Norwich to get 3 points and to really push hard in their bid to get into the playoffs. Of course, they're only outside of it now by goal difference. I know Hull have a game in hand, but they'll feel that they really have the momentum going into these last 14 games of the season. It's a huge one at Carrow Road, and of course we'll have every kick covered across our channels. Go to pinkun.com/subscribe to find out more about how you can subscribe and access our subscriber exclusive articles, columnists, Q&As, audio and video, all the good stuff, and of course our Pinkun Plus app with reduced advertising and quicker loading speeds. We've also got a WhatsApp channel, so have a search of that on your WhatsApp and be updated with all the latest Norwich City news. That's all my plugging done. Thank you for joining me on Tactics Board, and I'll see you soon.